everyone, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name's Emma, and if you're not new here, I have a fun video idea concept that I haven't done before. I've seen a lot of other booktubers do videos where they specifically read one genre in a reading vlog, and I wanted to do that as well. And something I frequently say is that fantasy romance is my genre of choice, but I've noticed in the past couple months I haven't been reading that many, so I figured what better way to get through my fantasy romance TBR than to make a vlog out of it. I don't know yet specifically what books I'm gonna be reading for this vlog, but I have so many options. Literally, my TBR is stacked with fantasy romance books. I will be reading specifically that genre, but I am gonna let myself mood read throughout the video. I'll stop rambling and let's get into it. Okay, so I think I've decided I want to start off the video with Daughter of No Worlds because I'm already partway into it. I've been going back and forth between reading the actual book and listening on audio because this entire trilogy is actually free on Audible, and this book is so heavy. Like, it's a floppy paperback, which I normally like to read, but it like hurts and cramps my hand while I'm trying to hold it and read it. So I think I'm gonna like switch over and fully just finish it on audio. But basically, so far, the premise of this is that our main character, Tasana, has grown up like a slave and like a magic wielder performer, if that makes sense. She buys herself out of the slavery and goes to join this group called the Orders, and then she learns that she has to go through an apprenticeship, and the only person who's available to work with her is a guy named Max. Max like doesn't really want to work with her, like he for some reason has a grudge against the Orders. Then he finally agrees to do it, and that's kind of where I'm at. It's quite a while later, and ignore the clips in my hair. I wanted to give a little update on the book because I've listened to like a lot of it. The love interest Max, at first I wasn't really vibing with him. Like, I didn't dislike him, but I wasn't in love with him or anything, and I was confused if this was gonna be a grumpy sunshine. It's more just that they're both very reserved people, because it's not even enemies to lovers either. Like, they're not enemies to lovers, but it gives that vibe in the sense that like both of them are very closed off about their feelings and their past, and I'm eating it up. Hey everyone, it is now the next morning, and I got really far into the audiobook. I think I only have an hour left of it, and I'm really loving it. It has taken a turn that I like totally didn't expect. I was expecting the romance to be a more significant part of the story, but it is definitely a slow burn. Like I said, there's an hour left only of my audiobook, and we're just now getting to some more romance and not just like the tension of the book. I didn't mind that so much of the book is just like tension and banter, but I guess I was just surprised. I'm about to go to like a photo shoot thing for work. That's why I'm up and getting ready, but I'm pretty sleepy and I feel like my thoughts aren't making sense. I think I'm gonna listen to the audiobook while I'm getting ready and potentially finish it this morning. Overall, I'm really liking it right now. I don't think it's gonna be a 5-star read, but I'm really enjoying it, even though it's very different than I was expecting. Update for you guys and little change of scenery because I'm actually in my hometown right now, and I don't normally film here, so that's also probably why this angle looks whack, but this seemed to have the best lighting. I finished Daughter of No Worlds and really liked it. Honestly, can't even remember what I said in other updates, but I'm just gonna give my brief thoughts overall. It was less romance than I was expecting it to be, and it definitely is still an adult book, but it's so different from the other Carissa Broadbent books I read that kind of threw me off. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I guess I was just expecting it to be more romance heavy. But really, I would say there was equal amounts of fantasy and romance. It was very balanced. I really like the politics, world building, and magic system that's set up in this book. Super creative, never read anything like it. I love the female main character and I love the male love interest. Even though it wasn't that romance heavy, there was great tension and the slow burn was incredible. So if you'd like a slow burn, you would definitely like this. For the majority of the book, I would say the characters are more just friends, and then the slow burn starts happening. It's kind of hard to describe without giving spoilers away, but I do feel like maybe romance is gonna become more of a central plot in the later books. But I love the dynamic between those two main characters, and it has so many great side characters as well. There was kind of some crazy plot twists happening at the end of the book that I'm really intrigued to learn more about going into the next book, and part of me really wants to start the second book immediately, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna switch to something else so I can read as many different fantasy and fantasy romance books as possible. But I am very excited to continue that series, and I do think I will be continuing it on audio. So in the story, the main character comes from a different country than where the majority of the story is taking place, and the voice actor who does the audiobook literally did a different accent for her, and it just made the story feel so much more immersive and real because it wasn't just like the same accent for every single character, if that makes sense. I think I'm gonna give it a solid 4 stars. That's just how I'm feeling right now, but I'm obviously gonna sit with it and see how I feel about my rating as the days go on, and I'll give an update at the end of this vlog. But currently I am feeling like it's a solid 4-star read. I think the next book I'm gonna go with is Filthy Rich Fae by Geneva Lee. I actually wasn't planning on reading this for this video, and then I received the ARC copy of it in PR, which if you guys know anything about me, I always feel so honored to receive ARCs. And I actually recently-ish read another book by this author called Filthy Rich Vampire, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm excited to see how I feel about this one. The other book I read by her was fantasy romance, but a little bit more romance heavy, and fantasy was more just like the setting and background to the story. It was a very mindless read, but a super, super fun, super spicy read. I feel like I just need a simple, easy, intriguing, and entertaining fantasy romance right now. That's definitely what I'm in the mood for. And since I just received an advanced reading copy, I figured what better time to read this book than in this reading vlog. Now, I will have to be careful about what I say about the story because I'm not really sure what the rules are there for receiving an ARC and like sharing. But this book does come out on June 25th. So this video may be going up after the release of this book. I'm not 100% sure yet, but yeah, I'll have to be super careful not to give away too much about this book, but I will share my thoughts and feelings as I'm going. I'm hoping I can fly through this one pretty quick because if it's anything like the other book I read by her, it will be such a fast-paced read. So it's time for an update because I honestly can't even remember the last thing I said or like the last update I gave. I know I started reading this book in this vlog, but I don't think I ever gave thoughts or like what the premise is. Like I said in a previous clip though, I can't give away too much because it is an advanced reading copy, but I'm gonna try my best to explain my current thoughts. Honestly, I'm more just gonna explain the vibes because I don't even know how much I can say about the plot. Basically, I'm not as far in as I thought I was gonna be. I'm 86 pages in, which is still really good, but I thought I was gonna absolutely fly through this book just based on what my reading experience was with the other book I read by this author. And the reason I thought that is because the previous book I read by this author was a very mindless, fast-paced, fun, entertaining, like it literally took no brain power type of read. And I was expecting the same thing out of this. It's definitely slower, but in a good way. It's a lot more heavy on the fantasy as compared to what the other book was like and what I thought this was gonna be like. So this book takes place in New Orleans and it's following our main characters Kate and Gage. Right off the bat, I was super intrigued that it was taking place in New Orleans because I feel like there's already a lot of like lore and fantastical myths surrounding New Orleans. So I thought that was super interesting that that's the setting for this story. It's a little bit reminding me of ACOTAR, very little bit reminding me, just in the sense that the way the plot is developed is reminiscent to me of the first ACOTAR book, although this is a more modernized fantasy, and like I said, it's taking place in New Orleans, but kind of the events that catalyst the plot are very similar to ACOTAR. And then also, I keep picturing the main guy as Elijah Michelson from the Vampire Diaries and the originals, and that might just be because it's taking place in New Orleans and the originals takes place in New Orleans, but I don't know, like they keep describing him as like kind of dark and broody, and that's just who I'm picturing. So I'm eating that up. This is marketed, I think, as an enemies to lovers, and they were not kidding. I think oftentimes a lot of fantasy romance gets advertised as enemies to lovers, but it's like they kind of dislike each other for 20 pages and then all of a sudden they're so attracted to each other, whereas this is actually an enemies to lovers. I feel like that's about all I can say about it right now. I'm hopefully gonna get through a lot of it later tonight because I already know what book I'm reading next for this video, and it was not on my radar at all. Like I didn't even know this book existed before I started filming this video, but now I'm so excited to jump into it. I have a whole fun backstory to how I found out about this book. I just graduated college and I'm working for a PR agency, and I was at a meeting with one of our clients. We were doing a shoot and I was kind of just chatting with the client about how I do book talk and booktube, and she was like, oh my gosh, I know someone who's an author. And I was like, that's so cool, I want to get into more Kentucky authors. And if you guys watch my June TBR video, I mentioned in there how that's kind of been a goal of mine, is to read more Kentucky authors, but I don't really know of many. I asked the title of the book and she said Crowns of Resemblance, and in my mind I'm thinking that's gotta be fantasy, maybe fantasy romance, like it's gotta be up my alley. And I asked, and she was like, I'm not sure what the genre is, but she's actually next door, do you want to go meet her? So I was like, yes, of course I do. I met the author. She was literally the sweetest. We followed each other on Instagram and TikTok. I'll put her handles on the screen here, and I'll also link them in the description if you guys want to go follow her and check her out. She told me that a bookstore in Lexington was carrying copies of it, told me where to find it. I was like, absolutely yes, I'm gonna go pick up this book immediately. She told me it was fantasy romance, enemies to lovers. She was explaining all the tropes in it, which were all things I loved, so I was super intrigued to read it. Then I headed to the bookstore, which is Joseph Beth in Lexington. I absolutely love Joseph Beth. It's beautiful in there. I looked everywhere for this book. I looked in the 2 places she told me she thought it might be. I checked in like the section where it could be listed alphabetically. I checked the whole fantasy section, the whole romance section. I wasn't sure if it was YA or adult. I checked both those sections, could not find it. I go to ask someone for help. They look it up in the system, take me to the section where it's supposed to be, and it was not there. And then finally, another worker comes over and is like, oh, I actually have a copy of this behind the counter. There's only one left. And that one copy that was left is the one I have in my hands. And I'm so excited to read this. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I do want to focus on finishing this before I jump over to this, but I am very excited to be adding this into the video because the way the author described it to me sounds like everything I like in a fantasy romance book. Hoping I might finish this one literally tonight, and then I will move on to Crowns of Resemblance. Good morning, everyone. A quick little update. I did not finish Filthy Rich Fae last night, but I have like the teeny tiniest bit left, but I am gonna wait to give my final rating and thoughts when I actually am complete with it. But I'm about to go on a hot girl walk, so I figured I would download an audiobook to listen to while I walk, and I noticed that The Prisoner's Throne was available on there, so I got that. If you don't know, The Prisoner's Throne is book 2 in the spin-off series of The Cruel Prince, and The Cruel Prince was one of the first fantasy series I read getting back into reading. It's hard to classify it as a fantasy romance because the Cruel Prince trilogy to me, it was a very light on the romance, even though it gets advertised as a romance. And then the first book in this spinoff was very, very light on the romance, but I have been hearing that this one's a little bit more romance involved, so I feel like even though it's cheating a little bit, I can still count it in this vlog. And I've actually just listened to the first chapter on my drive over to where I'm walking at, and I'm already really excited. There are some characters popping up already from the original trilogy that did not have appearances in the first book of the spinoff. Also, if you haven't heard of this trilogy, I'm probably making no sense. Okay, y'all, it is update time, and it has been quite a while since my last update. I think the last clip I recorded was whenever I was starting the audiobook of Prisoner's Throne, but it is now like quite a while later, and I did finish Filthy Rich Fae that day that I gave the update, and I've let myself kind of sit on what I wanted to rate it because when I initially finished it, I was kind of torn where it sat between a 3 and a 4 star. I think I've settled on a solid 3 star the longer I've thought about it. It was a really fun, quick, and easy read, and at the time of me filming this, I believe this comes out 10 days from the day I'm filming this, but once again, not sure when this video is gonna go up. It may be before this is released, it may be after, so I'm not gonna say too much about it. When I first started this book, and I believe I said this in the video, I picked this one up because I was wanting a fast-paced, kind of mindless, entertaining, fun, smutty read, and it was that, but not to the extent that I was expecting it to be, and that's on me. But this one was a lot more world building and character development involved, which I really, really liked, but it just wasn't exactly what I was in the mood for at the time of picking this up. That's not to say I didn't enjoy this, but I do think if I would have picked this up at a different point in time, I might have landed on a higher rating for it. Just to quickly highlight a few of my favorite things from this book. One, I loved the way that fantasy was incorporated into the modern world. Like I said, it took place in New Orleans, so it was super fun seeing kind of that mesh of New Orleans and also the fantastical elements of the story. It was also an enemies to lovers and like a serious enemies to lovers. The tension and banter were fantastic. And then the third thing I absolutely loved about this book was kind of the found family aspect. There were so many side characters in this that we got to know really well and kind of see more into their backstory and personality. And I really, really loved that because it wasn't just focused on the main character and the love interest. All the side characters were very important as well. And it just made the plot more dynamic in my opinion, which I am a character-driven reader, so that's probably why I loved it so much. But if all of those sound like things you would like, I do highly recommend this book. And then over the weekend, I was at the lake with my fiance and his family, and I started reading Crowns of Resemblance by H.K. Laurin. I'm only 44 pages in, and honestly, I don't think I could really tell you guys the premise of this. I was reading this at the lake, so I was on a boat, it was hot, and it wasn't like I could just sit down and read this for long periods of time. So it was more like I would pick it up, read a few pages, put it down, a couple hours later, pick it up again, read a few pages again. The main character's name is Alessandra, and she is the queen of, what's it called? Minilis. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. We've basically just been getting kind of a setup as to who she is and what her life looks like. For the audiobook of The Prisoner's Throne, I'm actually a lot farther in than I was expecting to be. I've just been throwing it on when I've been driving, doing chores, that type of thing. It's been flying by, probably because I have it on 2x speed, but I believe I only have like an hour and a half left of the audiobook, so there's a very good chance that I'll actually finish this before I finish this. I'm loving this a lot more than the first book in this spinoff. The first book kind of let me down just in comparison to the Cruel Prince trilogy because I love the Cruel Prince so much. And this might be bold of me to say, but this is living up to the Folk of the Air / the Cruel Prince trilogy. And a lot of that is to do with the characters that are involved in this story and the setting of where it's taking place. I don't know if that's why I'm loving it more, because it's more reminiscent of that original trilogy, but I'm also loving our two main characters so much more in this book than I did in the first one. And like I had heard, the romance is a little bit more involved in the plot than it has been in previous books in this entire world. It is still not a central plot. It is a minor side plot, but it is more significant than it has been in the past, if that makes sense. It just feels good to be back in the world of Elfhame, and I kind of am getting like nostalgia to when I read the Cruel Prince series for the first time, so that's definitely adding to my enjoyment of it. But those are my updates so far. I am probably going to keep listening to the audiobook of this as I'm doing chores and such. Whenever I get time to actually sit down and read, I'm going to try and get a big chunk into the Crowns of Resemblance. Hi guys, it has been a couple days since I gave my last update, and that is because I might be in a teeny tiny book slump, which usually I get in at least one really bad book slump a year, and last year that was in the months of June and July. I'm hoping this is just a tiny one and I'll get out of it quick, but I definitely am in some type of book slump. But that is not any of these books that I've read in this video's fault. It's just how I am, and like I said in the beginning of this video, I was gonna let myself mood read within the fantasy romance genre. That being said, I did finish the audiobook listen of The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. I believe I said this in my last update. This book surprised me with how much I enjoyed it. I previously had been a little bit let down by the first book in this spinoff, so I wasn't really going into this with super high expectations. I was more just excited to be back in the world of Elfhame. This was super fun, a great time, very engaging and fast-paced plot, and something about the way that Holly Black writes fantasy just has such a whimsical feel to it. And I actually made a TikTok one time using the word whimsical to describe the Folk of the Air world, and someone in the comments was like, whimsical, what do you mean? People are literally killing each other in these books. But even though it is high stakes and very serious plot lines going on, it still has that fun, whimsical, fairy tale-esque vibe to it that I just eat up. I'm gonna go with a 4 stars on this one, and I'm very, very excited to see where she goes from here. I would love to see her write more stories and more books that take place in this world, because something about it is just so addicting, and I absolutely adore being in the world that these characters exist in. Now for what I was kind of putting off filming this for, I think I'm going to soft DNF Crowns of Resemblance, but not because I'm not enjoying it. I'm actually really enjoying it. I did get a little bit further into it, but because I'm starting to feel slumpy, I really want to be able to read this at a time where I'm feeling excited about reading it and can fully enjoy the story. Like I explained to you guys, I met the author, she explained to me what it's about, explained the tropes, and everything about this is exactly what I love in a fantasy romance book. So I don't want to force myself through this read when I know that if I pick it up at a later time, I'm probably going to enjoy it a lot more. TBR. At this current moment, I'm gonna set it aside and read some palette cleansers before I jump back over to this. So be on the lookout for my June reading wrap up, because more than likely this book will be in it, and I'm also gonna be posting some TikToks about this book and my thoughts on this book. So if you guys are interested in knowing more about my reading experience with this book and everything I thought, I do have my TikTok linked in the description, so be sure to follow me over there so you do see when I post about this book. But with all that being said, and considering that I literally am in a mini book slump, I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. It was definitely really fun to focus on one specific genre for a video, and I genuinely do not think focusing on fantasy romance only is the reason I'm in a slump. I think it's just the time of year, because this has happened to me before. But if you guys would want to see me do more videos like this in the future, where I do a full reading vlog focusing on only one genre, let me know in the comments and I would love to do that. I found some really great reads from this video, and it's made me even more excited to get to the rest of the fantasy romance books on my TBR. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because it would really help me out. And you can check out all the other videos posted on my page currently. As I mentioned, my TikTok is linked in the description below, as well as my Instagram if you guys would be interested in following me over there and seeing all of my other content. And that's all for now. Bye guys.